Hello, my name is Peter. I'm here to present our new product, Rapid Cloud Development, which is basically a development tool which allows any Openedge developer to develop as a full stack developer cloud software. So first I'll go through some boring slides, but they're kind of important to understand where we're coming from and what our goal is and what we try to achieve. So it's actually a framework which is for the small to mid-sized companies, basically. So our target is not the huge, humongous companies who have 50 plus developers. We're focusing more on the smaller companies who are actually using Openedge as a backend and who have been developing in Openedge for many years. And based on that, we want to give them a tool which allows them to modernize their needs. Now, we recognize the needs of the small to medium-sized companies because they have often more costs and time-related concerns than the bigger companies. You know, they're a bit more lax, they have more budgets, but for us little guys, you know, it's a bit more tight. And what we also require are the same technical levels as the bigger companies, but we're working with a much smaller team, and this is a challenge, especially when the market shifts as fast as it does today. So we have to, step up as a smaller company. We're also always working under strict deadlines and with a lot of pressure. So we're recognizing all these things. So we do not need actually very large, complex, extremely elaborate and complex systems that takes weeks and months to learn. We need something simple. Keep it simple is basically what we need. What we also need is a lot of flexibility from a tool, because our own customers are actually also demanding it from us. They need a lot of custom coding, a lot of specific coding on their part, because they want to achieve a certain level of customization, and we need to be able to answer to those needs. So, our goals eventually were to make a tool that allows us to stay in the Openedge technical pool. So we need to salvage as much as we can. Every piece of code is important. We also we need a tool that allows us to continue our business with minimal investments. So we don't want to attract new developers with new technologies who basically require expensive training sessions. We also have a problem with a lot of uncertainties and risks of the unknown, because we're not knowledgeable in those kind of new technologies. And what we've been doing for 20 years is basically what we want to continue doing. We want to focus on our business logic. We also need to modernize, because if we don't modernize, the story ends, basically. And we need a single tool which can build anything. So from a complex ERP system, a CRM, a web shop, VMS applications on scanners, self-scans, touchscreens, whatever, we need just one tool to achieve all that. We also need real flexibility and dynamic runtime code. And we obviously take the principles of saving costs to a whole new level. That means we reuse everything which we can, objects, apps, techniques, standards. We try to reuse as much as possible. We also want to keep everything as simple as it can be, so basically anybody can develop with it. It also needs to be affordable. It's also important. Make sure that also in web technology, I do not need weeks to produce one screen or one application. Basically, we need something which gives us the opportunity to develop something working with CRUD actions under 10 minutes. That's what we need. We also need something which doesn't force us to do a big bang change. So we need something which can run next to our existing application. I also need something which keeps me competitive for the next 20 years. also need something that allows me to publish a full cloud or a private cloud or wherever I want. So I need to have that choice as well. And it should be learned as fast as possible. You can start producing applications with our framework. If you just have 2 days of installation and training, you're basically set to go, actually. And it's very difficult to find senior technical developers at the moment because they're scarce. So we need to make sure that it is as simple that you can basically allow a junior level developer to be productive as soon as possible. So if you read all that, you can already see that we have a lot of needs as smaller companies. So we also did a test now. We took an intern right out of school. We gave him 2 weeks of training. He didn't know anything about Openedge, nothing. We just gave him basic training of 4GL. We gave him training of our application, and within 2 weeks he was productive. We also need to standardize a lot of stuff, also endpoints. And we've done that by achieving, you can create a complex application, ERP, CRM, whatever, with these 7 sets of endpoints. All of these have a certain structure, and as soon as you understand these 7 and you can apply them, you can basically build quite complex software. The grid, for example, has 2 endpoints, which is the grid def and grid data. The def is to build the grid dynamically with all its columns, all its properties, which you can do from the backend, obviously. And the grid data is to populate your grid with data. Then you have a form, which handles all the update stuff. And it will get a record, and it will set a record. A set handles, of course, all the CRUD actions, new, modify, delete, copy. Everything is done within one endpoint. And then you have list, which is quite an interesting one, because like I said, we like to reuse everything. So within one list endpoint, we can basically feed information to a bunch of different type of controls. I can use the same list to basically use a drop-down, or I can do it with an autocomplete, even a radio box, selection list. Basically, a bunch of these controls work exactly with the same type of endpoint. And the only thing which is different in these kinds of endpoints is actually the table name which you're using and the queries. Then we have the UI rules. That's an endpoint type which allows us to tell the front end what to do. For example, you have to basically split the logic from your old application or current application. You have to split the business logic from the front end. So basically, a lot of this business logic relies on data, on database data. So what you need to do is to have a tool which can access the database values and then push actions to your front end. And that's what we do with our UI rules. And then we have the third one, or the 7th one, the last one, which is basically one endpoint which can build any type of chart. So you can have pies, bars, whatever. One type of endpoint, again, fill it with different types of data, different fields, different tables. You return the same type of endpoint, and the objects on the front end will understand it, and they will know what to do. What technologies did we use to achieve all this? Of course, we have the Passoe backend, because we're exclusively working on the Progress backend. We don't want, again, we don't need everything as a small company. We need just to have a good connection to our backend. And our backbone, basically, always, for us at least, is Openedge. So we're using the Passoe. We're using Node.js, which is allows us to make asynchronous requests, which is quite fun because I can just bombard the server with 70 requests, and at the same time as they come in, they get processed on the front end, and I'm not losing time as a user. What we also developed is WebSockets in the framework, and this is actually a two-way communication, which allows us to do a lot of stuff. For example, you would want to delete a record, and in your endpoint, you have additional checks to do with your database. And you don't want to ask in the beginning of the button delete, do you wish to delete it? Maybe you want to first check a bunch of stuff and then ask the question. So with the WebSockets, you could send the question while doing the processing the request. You could send the question to your front end to be answered by the user. Do you want to delete? Yes, no. Then you can send another question, or whatever. And then basically finish your endpoint and give back the response. So the WebSocket is a great tool to do that, but it can also do a lot more than just that. WebSockets, you can build your own chat environment in your own chat application. You can do broadcasting of data. For example, if one user updates a certain record, a customer, and you have like 20 other users who also have that same information on the screen, then it automatically broadcasts that to any and all sessions, and it will automatically update the data in their screen. So that's also one of the ways how we use WebSockets. Custom controls. Of course, all of this cannot be achieved without really customizing the controls and making sure they're working seamlessly with the framework. And then we've created a AI rules engine, which is, of course, not the one which Progress is using, because it's too big for us. We need something really focused, and we've built our own rules engine, and every endpoint or API, which is called, can return rules to this rules engine, and it will execute it whatever you want. For example, if you change a certain value in a certain field, then another field should be hidden or mandatory or whatever. Not only a field, but any other object can be accessed, and we could set any property of any object. Which is quite interesting, because then you can really use your business logic in the back end and simply push it to the front end, whatever you need. We don't really need coding on the front end, because we're using a simple, straightforward wizard, and within that wizard, we have a lot of events which we can handle. And of course, like I explained, we can also use it from the backend by any endpoint. We're also using Docker to build the application, the final application. So we're building a Docker which you can simply install anywhere. And the designer is hosted in the cloud, while all your sources and the database remain locally installed on your server. So you keep the ownership of your own code. It doesn't pass at any point. The designing tool is in the cloud, but everything else is on your local servers. Here are some example screens that just to give you an idea what you can build with this. This is, for example, a tiles object which generates like a main menu with subcategories and then the apps inside. This is, for example, a grid with here a form next to it with some actions on top, with some buttons. This could be a detail screen of, let's say, customers, suppliers, products, no matter what. And as you can see, you can build quite complex ones, and we'll show that also a bit later, how you can do that. This is, for example, a lookup screen for postal codes or whatever. That's also possible without even having to write any code on the front end. Here we have also the option where we can have entire self-sufficient apps within a grid row. So it doesn't have to be specifically a subgrid, like a sales order and sales order lines. You could put there whatever you want. It'll just create the app, say that part needs to go there, and you just need to link it together so it understands which is the parent ID, and then that app works just as well. So we can put stuff together and reuse them as well, which I'll come to that a bit later. For example, these smart controls which we tried to create, like a PDF viewer, all you need is to send that in an endpoint, and it'll render it automatically on the on the screen through this control. And there are also some other controls, of course, HTML editors, drop files, whatever, all these things. This is an example how you can create your own dashboard. Again, the chart data endpoint. So all of these are created with one type of endpoint. And you can just build them as a non-developer. So as a developer, all you need to do is to create your endpoints with the correct data in it. And a non-developer can design in the dashboard these types of screens. So now I'm going to show you a bit around the designer, how it looks like, and what you can do with it. So, oh, no signal. What happened? Okay. So we have two parts. We have what we call the designer, which is this part here. And then we have the second part, which we call the portal, which is this is, let's say, the final product of your application, which you've built. So the designer is set up that you can create many projects. So what is a project? An ERP system, a VMS, a warehouse management system, a delivery app. All those things can be described as an application or a project. Then we have the users, obviously. You can set up the users which you need. And you can see, of course, who is working and who is not at this time. And when you go inside the project, you will have your designer, and this is basically where, well, most of the work is happening. And here on the left side, you have a list of all your different objects with your components. A component is a part of an app which you design and reuse in a lot of other applications. For example, if I have, let's say, I want to have a grid with a PDF viewer next to it for documents, then I could just create that as a component, and then I can reuse that same component in my customer management, in my suppliers, in my sales orders, my purchase orders. I don't need to do anything else. I just drop the component on that application. I'll just make sure that I pass the right parameters to it, and then it runs accordingly. So again, we're reusing the code which we've just created once. So the last thing which we have applications which you can build. We can build components, and these are the templates. These are the grid row templates which you can build as well. Again, reusable, like the sales order lines which you host within a sales order grid row. So those are the templates. Now, let's create a new app on the fly. I'll call it bug. Okay. I'll call that. So I'm creating now a new app just to show you how quickly you can develop from scratch a new application, or a new screen in this case. So what it'll do is it'll create one application, which is called, in this case, PAC 2023, and this has a container. If I want, I can choose another kind of layout. So I'll just take this one, for example. Now I have two containers. I can resize them here because I want to have that as a preset. And now I can start adding objects simply with the drag and drop. For example, I'll just take the data grid. I'll drop that. And then I have here some attributes which I can populate. So as I said earlier, we have two endpoints needed for the grid. And you can populate here the grid definition and here the grid data. Of course, I need to create something, so I'll do create new endpoint, because we have an endpoint builder with some templates already foreseen, which you can edit on your own. If you want to personalize that a bit, you can, because everything is on your server basically. So let's say address test. I'll take something from my address table, and this is a default column list which I would like to see. For example, some address sequence number, name, street, town, for example. So now the endpoint has been successfully created, and I can just simply save that, and I can immediately execute that and see what the result is. So here you go, here's my test. This is already my grid, which is done. I did it in a few seconds. And this is all the data which basically it holds. And by default, I can select any other field which comes from my database, and I can just add that here. And then, for example, I want to add the, let's say, the country code. Then it'll simply add the country code, and I can refresh that, and then the country code will be populated in this case. Of course, it's not translated yet, because I would want to see there Belgium, and I want to put there maybe some flags and all that stuff, so that we can tune in the endpoint later. Now, if I go back to my designer here, and I want to change some stuff, then I can, of course, modify immediately here, and it'll open my code editor. And then I can add here maybe some additional fields, like, I don't know, a company code or whatever. And I'll simply save that. I can even do a syntax check, so it'll just give me some OK back. And then I can execute that again, or just refresh the page. And now, it's by default, it's here in my column. Now, if I want to also have some update features or some fields next to it, then I'll simply select here a form. I'll do the same. I'll drag and drop a form. And a form is quite an intelligent object, because it has some update features inside. So I can, again, add there an endpoint. I'll do that again. Address test. Test. Sequence number is my primary key. Okay. So he created me immediately these two endpoints, which is the record get and the record set. And now, by doing that, he immediately already executed those endpoints for me, and he returned me the fields from my tables. So now I can simply drag and drop these fields, or just multi-select them. I can do that as well, like that. And then language code or whatever, and I can drag them here, and then I have these fields here. If I want to change this in another type, I can simply change the object. I could simply say, please make this a drop-down, and use some other endpoint, which is the data source endpoint, and then I can specify here what exactly I want as an endpoint. And again, here it works the same way. Create an endpoint, and it'll create the endpoint. But I'm now going to choose some existing one. Let's say lists. It doesn't matter what I choose. I just want to demonstrate that a bit. And also, I'll simply change that to a autocomplete, for example. And then I'll simply save that. And obviously, I have to map my form to my grid. So what I'll do here is I'll simply say, please use the row ID of the selected data grid to update, to refresh your form. Once I did that, I simply go here, I refresh the page, and my fields are already here. I just need to, 1 second. I'll change this to a different loading type, because otherwise I'll load too much data. So I have two loading types in the grid, a scrolling method or lazy load. Scrolling method just loads a batch of records, and when I reach the end, it'll load the next 100 or 1,000 records, whatever batch you set up in the grid. If it's a lazy load, it'll just load per batch until the data is completely in the grid and without interfering with the user, basically. Here we go. So as you can see, this is displaying all my data, and this is the autocomplete. For example, if I would start typing something, then you can have whatever list you want here and simply apply it. So as you can see, it's very drag and drop like, easy to do, and using these templates, it'll be very easy to create your apps. In your portal, I want to go over here as well. In your portal, what you can do here, you have here your open applications, which I started now from my designer, but I could also start them from my menu, for example. Here I have a menu. I could say, I don't know, whatever, articles, and start here articles, for example. Okay, this is an unfinished one, a test, so that won't look good. But basically that's what this does here. You can put here your own, on this left side, you can put here your applications which you want as quick links. You can put there your to-do list, you can put there your dashboards, you can put there whatever you want. For example, here I have, on this environment, I have my dashboard set up here as a quick link. So this is my main menu, and this would be my dashboard then. And then I can simply select between the two dashboard types if I want a different one, if it's set up, of course. So that's kind of a simple thing to do. Other things which you can do here is change languages, because the framework supports, I think, like 18 languages approximately. So you can switch to any language. It's also multi-company supported. So if you have multiple companies in your application which you want to support, you can simply switch companies by clicking on one of those, or just click on this little icon here, and then it'll open a new tab and it'll just run the portal for that company. So the multiple languages, multiple company technology is there. If you need it, you can access it and use it. If not, then not. Now, other things which you can do here, which might look silly, but I've noticed that some of our customers are happily using that. You can simply change your theme, color theme, obviously, and you can also, build your application in a certain color theme of your choosing. Of course, you can customize basically any object to your liking, bold, a different font, doesn't really matter. Now, if we go over the different objects which we have, you'll see that we have like the basic stuff. The data grid is a complex one. The drop-down multi, dynamic fields. Dynamic fields is a object which allows you to dynamically create fields and screens from the backend. For example, I have here, let's say, article, a certain article. Let me just search something. I think CA. Doesn't matter. Try this one. So this might be a detail screen where you obviously see here some numbers, which are batch texts, which you can put whatever you want in it. And this is actually already prefetching the data from the grid, which is behind this this folder. And when you click on the folder, only then it'll load your data. So everything, again, is customized to be as performant as possible. Now, these kind of things here, this is all dynamic. So all of these fields, which look like somebody has designed them manually, in fact, they're not. They're just backend code. We're simply using that one dynamic object to say, please render me these and these fields and link them to these and these table fields, and then all the updates will happen just as well as if you have designed them manually. We even had an example here where we basically have a translation service in the backend, which will translate whatever is here. For example, and now I could ask the system to translate that for me. Do you want to translate that? And basically now it's going to translate that in the backend. And I'm basically pushing now a progress bar from the backend to the front end because I'm still in my endpoint, I'm still working. But I'm updating stuff on the front end so that the user knows what's going on, and he knows he has to wait, or he can still cancel the process and then the endpoint stops. But basically, this is an example how you can create dynamically any sort of screen or field or collection of fields, and then push that from the backend. It's almost finished. There you go. So from the backend, I've pushed basically the translated values on those fields on the front end, and all I have to do now is basically save that, and I'm done. Yeah. So here's another example. I have here some tabs on the front end, on the top. Inside the first tab, I have here again a lot of different tabs. Inside that tab, I have here again different tabs which are may or may not be created even dynamically. This entire stuff here is done completely by code without even designing anything. Now, if we want to look, basically, we want to see how that looks like in a designer. Just log in quickly. So that screen which you just saw is basically looking like that. I'm designing here tabs. This is a component for my documents, like I said. It's a component wrapper, which I can then look for in the components. This is also a component for my emails. And this one I've designed myself manually. And I've created here different tabs. And as you can see here, I'm using the dynamic fields object with its endpoint here, which basically will do all that work for me. If you want to have a look how that looks like in the backend, this is just an endpoint which we've created, and the only thing which basically this does is create these dynamic field records and map them together to each other, because one is the parent of the other, for example. And that's it. That's the piece of code which will build all my fields. It's not more than that. Here are, again, on the last tab, inside here, also a lot of tabs, so I can basically do whatever I want with that. So I can create quite simple applications. I can create complex applications as well. Now, if you want to continue here a bit, if I want to add now here some actions, I'd simply say, create me a ribbon container, and then it's going to add here all my buttons for me, and I can simply add here additional buttons on the fly. Test button. I'll save that, and I'll open the portal. And as you can see, I have here all my buttons at my disposal. Here on the left side, we often have filters as well. These are inline filters, which are added by default. So every data which I have in the grid, I can now filter on. But if I want to create like filters which send back requests to the backend, in that case, I'll design from the backend in the grid dev endpoint, create filter 1, create filter 2, create filter 3, and then he's going to create me a panel here on the left. I'll show you how that looks like. Here, this is filters general and extra codes. So I can even create here different tabs. And all I need to do is basically define them, instruct it which list to open or to link to it, and then basically the control itself does everything which you need. Once you hit enter, it'll refresh the page, and it'll show here on top the filter selected from this group. For example, I'll do a combination here, postal code 1 and the language Spanish. If that's not good enough, then I'll take, let's say, Dutch. And now I have some entries. If I want to remove them, it's one simple X, then it's gone. What you can also do is play with it and put here some filters on top. And I've mapped this filter here, for example, to search in the name, the street, the country, everything. It's all back-end code. All I have to do is say, this field is actually a filter of my grid, and then it'll pass that back to the endpoints, and then the endpoint will do the dynamic query and give me back the results. For example, I'll do MER with an enter, and then it'll show me all the MERs, and then I could do maybe Belgium. So for example here, all the Belgiums as well. Or I'll just do a VAT number, it doesn't matter. You can type there whatever you want. These things are also quite powerful. You can have fields, any field, input field or drop-down field, whatever, and you can embed a button into that. So here you could say, okay, show me the turnover of that year. You can click on that. You can then open another app which shows a chart or whatever. So these buttons can also be embedded into other fields, which is also an interesting feature because you can then link them together. You can say, put them next to each other or just really embed them as well. So with that in mind, if you can create your apps and you can specify lookups as well, just by telling certain objects, this is the lookup field and this is the lookup app, and then basically the lookup grid will try to transmit the same field as your own field, so it'll also do automatic population of these kind of things. So that we're really trying to make to conserve as much energy as possible for an Openedge developer, and not having to worry about these kinds of repeating hassles or work actually. I would like to ask people if you have some questions at the meantime. Yeah.
How responsive is the screen? So, for instance, if you were running it on a tablet or a mobile device, have you got things like containers which automatically move fields below each other?
Yeah, yeah, it does. It is responsive. Let me see if I can show you here. Here's the detail screen. So you can move that down, and this one doesn't jump to the next level, as you can see. But if you then open that application and change a little property, let me just open the suppliers one. So this is the supplier one, and I have here a splitter. I could say here the minimum width should be 300 pixels per panel, and then I'll simply save that. And then I'll, sorry, I have to refresh the page, obviously. And if I now, nope, I have to refresh the page. Doesn't work. Oh, sorry, employees, I need suppliers. Here, this one. Change the wrong one. There it is. It jumped underneath. See?
And when you're designing those forms, how much fine control do you have on where the fields go?
Well, you can use splitters basically to put them next to each other, but you can do splitters in splitters in splitters. So basically, there's no limit to how exactly you want to put these fields. You can also use splitters, for example, to say the top panel has to be set in a certain height, and the lower panel can be resizable according to the screen. Anybody else? Yeah.
How do you add some UI logic in that? Disable a field or
Yeah.
enable hide fields?
Okay, so here, for example, if I select any field, I have here my rules manager. And if I click on that, I get a little wizard here. And I can simply select which type of event I want to set up. In this case, I want to see maybe a key press. And then here I can do if enter was executed. Then I need to do something, maybe add an action to execute an endpoint. And then I can do some UI rules endpoint here, which I want to execute maybe. And that UI rules endpoint can then handle, it'll receive all the screen's information of every field of that application and all its attributes. So the values, the properties, is it bold, is it mandatory, is it hidden, is it read-only, all those kind of things we get inside the endpoint. You can use that in the endpoint to check stuff. Also check data-related things, combine them together, and then return instructions to this UI rules manager. There goes my VPN. To instruct the UI rules manager to do certain actions, to hide stuff or to make stuff visible. I'll
Actually pack all the data and UI from the screen, send them back on the backend.
Yeah, it can send it back to the backend, but at the same time, you could also do things here because you can add here an if block. If that happens, or add condition, for example, if that field is hidden, and etc., etc. So you could build your UI here on the front end as well. So you don't have to send everything back to the back end, but most often than not, you need database-related information to set certain rules, your business logic basically. And of course, you can do it on the front end, but we would advise to use it on the back end because there you have all the powerful code of ABL, of course.
How is the product shipped to a customer?
Well, we build a Docker container, and you can simply download that. You get a link, and you can download that from our Docker repository, and then you can install that on your local installation wherever you need it to be. Is it a Linux or is it a Windows? Doesn't matter.
And is there also a mechanism for patching the codes to a certain customer, or is it then really the complete Docker container?
No, you can patch. That part hasn't been finished yet, but we're building on a version management inside the tool. That means that you can simply build a solution, install that somewhere, and then inside the solution we know per application which version it is. And then imagine that one is version 2.0. Then you can go back here, you can say edit 2.0 because 3.0 and 4.0 are already created. So I'll edit 2.0, it'll create 2.1. I'll fix everything. Then I say, okay, now I want the download link. It'll give me an URL, and I'll simply go to the installed solution, and I'll simply enter that code, and it downloads that and installs it automatically. And then you've patched that one specific application. Of course, that's the front end, that's not the back end. The back end is your endpoints, your .ps or whatever you want to use there. That's, of course, up to you. Yeah.
How much can the end user do to define their own screen? So in other words, if you've got grids with columns, take it they can hide and view and move columns. Can they also move fields around, maybe hide tabs or collapse parts of the screen?
Yeah, it depends basically what you want them to do. We have another type of object here which is called a form group. and that one has collapse capabilities. So you could group certain, like here, you could group certain parts of fields together, like like logging, who changed what. Basically, you need it on the screen, but you don't have to visualize it always. So, as an example, you could say here, you want to enable the collapse, and you want to handle that manually, so that the user can do that manually, and the default value is collapsed or enabled. So in that way, if you do that, the user can still collapse certain things.
And would those be saved so that next time the user logs in, they would remain collapsed?
At the moment, that's not foreseen. But that might be one of the features. If enough people are requesting those things, then we, of course, will add those things as well. But it all depends on what is really important and what not. My personal experience also taught me that even though you have grids with a lot of capabilities, with columns and all that stuff, the average user won't even pay attention to those and just keep the default settings as is. So you would have to be a more interested user, let's call it like that, not advanced, but interested, to be able to arrange your own screens to be satisfied with that.
I'm just thinking in particular, if you've got the product installed at 20 sites,
Yeah.
each site, as part of the installation, there might be a super user there on site who wants to customize. They want to hide certain columns because they're not used
Sure.
by them. So just
Sure.
make the screen simpler.
Sure, that's doable. We foresee securities on tabs, on fields, on actions, on applications, role-based, obviously, with securities. And you'll be able to set that, of course. At the same time, in your grid definition, you can already build your own logic there, because we're building the grid dynamically. So if you say this person, or let's say this type of company doesn't need a production module, for example, then you can simply already not build the production columns, and then the user won't even see them. And it's the same for your dynamic fields. If you have certain fields which you would like to disable based on some parameters, like I said, production, you could simply build those dynamically and not build those when, return an empty data set when, or JSON string, of course, when the specific customer doesn't need to see those. So there's a lot of ways where how you can do that without even thinking about setting securities.
Where do you store the metadata, let's say, for the application? The designer, I suppose, that has all those endpoints and
Yeah.
the screen definition.
This is one JSON, in fact. All what you see is one JSON, in one JSON file, and that JSON file is also saved and transmitted to your local PASOE. We also keep that as well, because we're rendering the page, and we're keeping those. We also keep a lot of history saves. Every save which you do as a user will save that. If you made a mistake, you can always revert back to, let's say, a previous version which is saved. We won't do that every save on your database. We'll just send you the latest version on your database, in fact. But it's just a safeguard, because you're not really using that. We are using that to build the application. And also this portal here, this is a quite intelligent, let's call it a website, because that's what it is. It has a lot of intelligence inside, and that one basically renders those JSON screens at runtime.
All other endpoints that generates
They're
APL code, those are going
on
to
your
be stored
server,
on the
yeah.
server.
Yeah, everything is on your server besides the design of the screen. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have two questions. The first one is, you have the space set of components.
Yeah.
But let's say there is a special requirement behind the custom component. Is there a possibility to have own components?
At the moment, that's not foreseen, because it has to work with the backend. It's not just a development tool on the front end, it's also a framework on the backend, which helps the communication run smoothly and seamlessly. So it's not that evident for you just to put there a new component and basically have that work the same way as, because this portal has to render all of that, and he has to have the certain knowledge and certain code built in the controls for it to work properly, you know. So it's not so easy to just say, I can take whatever control and make that work.
The second question is, let's say I have two tabs with the same record, and I do an update in the first tab.
Yeah.
Will it refresh automatically the second tab?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's the broadcasting technology which we use with the WebSockets. Even your colleague next to you, another PC, will get its screen updated automatically. Even if it's just a row in a grid, even that row will be updated automatically without anybody having to do anything.
What do you have from debugging perspective? Because obviously it's all functioning. There are no bugs. But,
Well, I wouldn't say.
When it happens, what do you have there as a developer as a possibility?
Well, on the front end side, that's our responsibility, obviously. So if you report a bug, it'll be fixed as soon as we can. Obviously, hopefully the same day even. But most of the things are basically endpoint related. You're not passing the right filters, or you're not, passing some stuff. And those things you can, of course, debug yourself, because, Openedge also has a lot of tools, as we've seen even today in the telemetry session there. So that's what you can do there. But if you have issues, even questions about why is that not working, we're always helping our customers to identify the problem. And then obviously it's a learning curve for everybody to next time you'll probably think, oh yeah, I had that previously as well. So.
But for the things that are fired behind the screen, just the console developer tools.
Yeah, you can do the console. You can see that. Yeah, you can see every endpoint. I could do here a console here. I have here my network tab. I can do an F5 here, because that's what we use often, obviously, because we're creating, for example, here record get. I can see here the payload exactly. I know what goes to my backend, and then I'll see the response. I'll see exactly what comes back from my endpoint. So you have those developer tools, obviously, yeah. I think those are probably, for me, the most commonly used tools which I use when I'm debugging stuff, yeah. But besides that, it still might be in the back end, basically. But at least you can identify, I'm not getting it back. Or even you get sometimes compile errors, even if you have some, you'll see that in the response. Because we've also made sure that every error which comes from the back end is still returned as a response. Yeah.
If you want to hide sensitive information, one field, for example, for a certain role, are roles also available in the SOE is session, or is that specific to the Revit Cloud's environment, or is that?
Well, as you can see, all data is free to access if you just know the F12 key, basically. So you have to already be aware of that fact and make sure that when you transmit data, that it's data which that person is allowed to see. So that means that if I don't want to give you access to a certain field, I'll just make sure that you won't get that field across, Or if I want to give you like stars or replacements or whatever like that, I can still do that in the backend. But of course, if you see stars, well, then you can't edit those, obviously, because if you edit those, the stars get updated in the database. So you have to, I would suggest, rather than edit those things, just don't send the data, so you won't save them.
You said that it is meant for the small companies, let's assume with existing application. So how you would integrate with an existing backend, a fully functional one, that you don't want to change. You want only the front end done with your
Well, you'll probably need to make sure that the communication matches. So even if you have some backend endpoints already. We have one service handler which basically handles all the requests and then runs, obviously, these endpoints as .ps, because that's what the web connector does in Openedge. If you then build a layer in between that translates basically your outputs to match the outputs it needs, then it's fine, it'll work.
So basically you need an extra layer.
If you don't want to touch those, yeah, then you need like a layer which basically does the translation for you. Yeah, if you really need to. Yeah. Of course, you could also take your other endpoint, just take out the data which matters, or the code, and then use it here and here in the other endpoint, basically. So that only the communication part is different on different endpoints, but the code executed is exactly the same. So you're still left with one kind of .p or whatever, and just two, let's say, callers or handlers. So it's solvable. Okay. Well, then I want to thank you all for joining me here, and I hope it was interesting enough.